I don't want to ask you for your money anymore. That's a big thing. I just don't want to. I don't want to ask anybody for money. I'd always say I don't want to go into sales. To me, that felt like selling out or something. But what I realized, I had bought into that silly idea that you should find something that you can do that you love for a living. That everyone can ultimately find a way to participate in the economy by doing something that they love. I don't agree with that anymore. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the not live stream. I am done live streaming. I am done with Patreon. And I want to talk about the reasons why I think that those have, for me, hindered my freedom and disempowered me from my ability to pursue what ultimately matters most, which is my calling in philosophy and theory. And the sort of reasons why I think that those things matter right now more than ever, I'll just be blunt. I think that every time people get all hyped, like they think that we're making progress, I don't think that we really are. It's like, oh, cool, 1 inch forward and 10 feet back. Okay, but we've been going in circles since the 60s, and everything people are saying nowadays is just watered down versions of what people were saying then. These are rehashing old arguments and people retooling old categories that were used to try to understand different material conditions. And this comes from a failure to do theory. This comes from sorry about the moving camera. This is a really tacky background video that I set up because this is actually like what's literally outside of my door right now. And I thought, instead of like the city going by thing that I used to do, I fall in love too fast. Why not just set up a camera of the sun going down, so that at least if you're gonna watch me, you'll get to enjoy a good sunset. This whole camera shake thing, though, that wasn't supposed to be like that. I thought I edited that out. Why do I need to change the way things are going? Am I saying that everybody who has a Patreon is wrong? No, but I think that we need to develop new strategies, and we really need to develop new theory. I think that we have been stuck in old debates using old categories for a long time. These kind of like revolution versus reform versus escape. I feel disillusioned hearing people just repeat stuff that was being argued about in 1966. It's just, the more political history I've done, the more I'm like, oh wow, we really aren't getting anywhere. And I don't see how we're going to get anywhere just doing what we've been doing. But I'm not saying everybody needs to stop doing what they're doing immediately. I'm saying I know what I need to do, and I need to get to it. And what do I need to do? New theory. Developing theory. But I have a lot more research questions right now than I do time or energy to actually do that research. And I'm trying to think about how to best use this channel in a way that will empower me. And hopefully you, whoever finds interest in the things that I'm interested in, like, that's great. And maybe there can be some kind of a dialogue there. But there's a couple of things that I think that have kind of hindered my own development. For sure, for the last year, I've been, moving around and writing a book, and that's all important. But with it's come a lot of profound realizations about who I am and what I need to do. And one of those is just that, live streaming really saps my creative energy. I think that there's something about the time away from others, spent researching, spent developing, stuff builds up, and then you need to talk about it, and then you do. But the thing is if you're just always talking, right? If it's relatively unstructured, if it's hanging out, if it's stream of consciousness, if you're trying to monetize rants, I don't think those are good. I don't think that's I'll speak for myself. I won't judge everybody. It's not good for me. I'm not going to look back on my time when I have streamed and be like, oh, all of that was bad. It wasn't. There was a lot of good times. But they're not really worth going back to. And I think that value is something worth going back to. Like if you've created something of value, then it's worth going back to. And I don't think those things are really worthwhile. Nobody should have to pick through a 10-hour stream or a 3-hour stream. for the good parts. And I don't even think it's worth going through and editing stuff from. Like whenever I did try, I was always like, I might as well just go make more content instead of sitting here and edit this stuff. But then you just get in this sort of routine where you're just pumping content out constantly, and it was bad for me. It was soul crushing for me. And then the time that I took off from doing that, I was relieved. But then when I came back and actually did a stream, beyond the technical difficulties that I was dealing with living out here, which was its own problem, there was also the weird thing where people would be like, oh no, I missed this stream, dang it. And it's like, I'm not trying to build an audience that is going to be there when I turn on a camera. There's no offense, but like it's different. It's a different mindset. Like I want to be there for people. I want to be putting out content for people who are putting on their earbuds and then stocking shelves, working a graveyard shift at a grocery store. I want to be putting out content for people who are driving long haul truck. I want to be putting out content for people who are doing construction work and delivering pizzas. Not people who are sitting around just waiting for all their favorite streamers to come on. And I want to remove that distinction between the people who have the time and resources to do that and to try to pursue a career as an influencer versus the kind of fandoms that build around those people. I want to personally be doing research into the kinds of new questions, new symbolization, new theorizing that I think is important. Talking about developing new strategies, but getting away from this idea that we don't have time and that we don't have time to do theory, or that, praxis without theory is better than theory without praxis. I think that's a terrible idea, because praxis without theory just means doing potentially dangerous activities without really understanding what the downstream consequences might be. How these old, worn out strategies have already been appropriated by something like the Democratic Party, or how in general, radical rhetoric has become, it's all appropriatable to the Democrats, even when it's against the Democrats. Democrats just use it as their sort of bad cop for negotiations with their own constituencies, much less their the Republican enemies. And I just think that whole political machinery and then anything that kind of relies on it to substantiate its own identity and negation, to be against it all the time. Like, I just think the whole dynamic is just something that is, for me, undermines my ability to deep focus on the things that matter. Having even like 30 people in my Patreon, like this sort of idea that like, oh, if you want to have a voice, then you have to become an influencer, and if you want to be an influencer, then you have to have a Patreon, and if you want, no. I want to do something that I think other people can do, which is just turn on a camera and talk, work through some things that you're thinking through, but not just in a way that is for people's immediate gratification and instantaneous access. And I think that instantaneous access to attention is already a huge problem. I feel like we are being psychologically hacked, and that the distraction economy is actually what has developed around that. I don't like it. I don't want to be a part of it. I want to get away from it. I want to develop what I'm calling like effort buffers between myself and my audience, so that the people who really want to engage are going to be the people who are really thinking ahead and kind of in for the longer game, because I think there's been too much of an emphasis on act now. We already know the problems. Let's do it now. And I don't know anybody who's actively out there trying to build political power who I'd be like excited if they actually gained more power, because I don't think anybody really understands the problems or has real solutions, and I don't think I do. But the more I research, the more I'm like, no, y'all don't. And the people who I take most seriously, whether they're people that I read or that I talk to in real life, are also people in similar boats. And they're people who I ultimately want to be developing a better dialogue with along this journey. But those are people who take the time to read books And those are people who, or at least, if you're a busy worker, stocking shelves and all that, like we were saying, then you're listening to content, But I want to move away from the influencer scene and the sort of social occasion that kind of brings. The pressures to play along with the algorithms, to pump out content that's timely and relevant and all. I don't like that. There's so much going on every day. And there's a lot of really good people doing really good work on all of that already. No one needs me to be doing that. But more importantly, we need new conceptual means, and we need new practical strategies for dealing with our changing conditions. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to be developing. And the first big step for me, and I've had to spend some real time, I had this idea, I put it on cooldown, and then I almost announced it, and then I put it on cooldown again. Putting something on cooldown is when you decide to, no, we're going to pause that, let it sit for a little bit, see if we still feel the same a little while later. It's a way of developing maturity, I think, for myself, not being so impulsive. But I've thought a lot about it, and at this point I'm very sure I don't want to have a Patreon right now. And the reason I don't want to have a Patreon right now is not because I don't love my patrons, and there's several patrons who've just been really there for me when I needed them, but it's because I don't need them anymore. And so if they can put their money towards something more important, then they should. But I feel more empowered being financially independent from the people who may or may not want to engage with my content. I think that feeling financially dependent on the people who might want to engage with my content for whatever reasons ultimately stifles something in my soul. And I just don't think I want to do that anymore. And I realize I don't have to after, years of moving into situations that weren't optimal for me to be able to pursue my calling, because I was trying to cut costs so that I didn't have to work as much. Because when you aren't doing high skill level work, then you end up, you don't make as much money. And so if you're trying to not work as much, then you got to cut costs somewhere. And so I've cut costs on having a lease. I've cut costs on having healthcare. I've cut all kinds of corners that compromised my ultimate safety. But that I'm realizing that having a Patreon, or that living off the good graces of other people, it brings along a lot of sort of emotional roller coasters or psychological dynamics that aren't really necessary, aren't really contributing to my own, to my call. It's me being able to pursue my calling as an educator, or as a thinking worker and a working thinker. I'm not going to be able to do that. I can't do that when there are just people in my life, whether I know them really well or not, that just have instantaneous access to me and feel like they're part of my community just because they pay me some money. I love you, and you've really helped me through some times. But through those times, I came to the realization that, if there's a way that I can make more money in shorter time, and then be able to gain my financial independence from doing that, and then use the rest of my freed up relative time energy to be able to actually pursue what I feel called to be doing, and just kind of cut out the sort of weird social stuff that I don't really understand still, that just seems to undermine my creativity and my intellectual efforts, then great. And I have figured out how to do that. Because I was always told, oh, you'd be great in sales. You would be so great in sales. You should go into sales. I don't want to go into sales. I'd always say, I don't want to go into sales. To me, that felt like selling out or something. But what I realized is it's kind of, I had bought into that silly idea that you should find something that you can do that you love for a living. And that everyone can ultimately find a way to participate in the economy by doing something that they love. I don't agree with that anymore. I think that there's a lot of essential labor that needs to be done, and I think that needs to be redistributed in society so that there's not like a subhuman class of people who have to do the dirty jobs. But there's also jobs that currently exist, maybe they shouldn't exist, like in sales, that pay a lot of money because nobody wants to do them, because it's nothing that anyone could really love and make their life about. But then I realized, doing that part-time makes as much money as doing construction full-time. But then if I did that part-time, then I can spend the rest of my time reading, developing content eventually. I don't really want the pressures on me to develop content, because I'm not trying to build a following or have a platform or any of that bullshit that comes with influencer culture. Then there's also the realization that just like everybody's dream, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, apparently nowadays is to be a professional YouTuber. That's not I don't think that should be really a career. Or at least not one that like half of a generation like strives to become or do or like fantasizes about it. No, what if we all find ways to, add value to society through passion, but we kept that separate from money, and then ultimately we move towards a society where, look, everybody does work and everybody also gets to have a voice. Right? That you don't just have thought leaders and influencers be the only people who get to have voices. I don't like that. And I think that Patreon culture, though it has helped in some ways compared to the way things were previously, I just think that there are going to be better ways ahead of us and that we can move towards those. And I want to explore my own way of eking out a life where I'm pursuing my calling without relying on the good graces of crowdfunded stranger contributions. So I don't want to ask you for your money anymore. That's a big thing. I don't want to ask anybody for money. I don't want to take anybody's donations. I just want to feel free to do whatever I want to do. And like coming up soon, it's going to involve a real deep dive into Foucault, because I realized that he does some things that I'm really interested in that nobody talks about, and that, most of the reasons that I felt kind of, I don't like Foucault really much, was because of other people who like Foucault for what I feel might be the wrong reasons now. And that there's reasons that he matters to me, specifically not him, but his, stuff he's been developing, kind of enhances or kind of develops on certain things that I've been interested in that I didn't even realize that he's doing. So anyway, that's just one example. I want to be able to do that kind of a deep dive without feeling, while I'm doing that deep dive, like, okay, I've got to get back to work soon, but I got to finish this research project. Oh, before I finish this research project, I better put some content out online, because I have patrons, and my patrons, they have certain kinds of expectations for like the kinds of stuff that I'm going to I don't want that. I don't want it. And I also don't like the idea anymore of feeling like, oh, it would count. It would keep me relevant. It would keep me, it would keep my patrons happy to just start live streaming. No. Live streams are a real waste of a lot of people's time. And some people like them, but, there's better ways. And I'm going to try to find what the better ways are for me. And that's that. So I am really grateful for all the money that people have given me. I've made about $150 to $200 per month for a year. Had about 30 patrons. It wasn't a lot, but there was a time when that really mattered, when it really helped a lot. And now it just, thankfully, I've found a way where I don't need it. So I will be canceling my Patreon when this goes public. And instead of asking people to support me in that way, I will instead just say, hey, subscribe to my newsletter if you want to get updates about events that I might be doing, because I might eventually do some kind of like a book tour or something. But if you want to like know about when the book gets published, or newsletter, check your email once in a while. You might see something from me. Not too often, And if you do hate seeing too many updates from me and decide to unsubscribe, great. Who cares? I don't care. There won't be a lot of updates, but the thing is like, ultimately, if you're there for it, you're there for it. And you don't have to pay me to prove it. Just engage with thoughtful comments. That's literally thoughtful comments that add to a real dialogue that isn't clouded by just all the bullshit. I love that, and that's what I'm here for, and that's what I appreciate the most about the people who have kind of been along for this ride. I really do appreciate all that. Like, follow. subscribe.